Clay Helton is back for his fourth year. J.C. French the fourth, back for his second. It's time for Georgia Southern to contend in the Sun Belt East. It's Locked On Sun Belt.
You are Locked On Sun Belt, your daily podcast on the Sun Belt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Dave Schultz back with another edition of Locked On Sun Belt, your teams every day. Time to talk a little Georgia Southern Eagles, and we do it with our buddy, the Josh Aubrey from the Statesboro Herald in Statesboro, Georgia. And we talk Georgia Southern Eagles. He's been covering them since 1991. And as I mentioned throughout, since Sun Belt Media Days and probably well before that, Clay Helton is back for his fourth year. J.C. French back for his second. Same coach, same quarterback. That's important in these days. And with the turnover in the East, including JMU potentially, in terms of quarterbacking, we'll see when Alonzo Barrett III is back. It could be an opening for Clay Helton, J.C. French, and those Eagles. They do start out on the West Coast. Not going to be easy. They very easily could start out 0-2, could start out 2-0, but they could start out 0-2, and yet they could still be very, very good this year. They're starting out at Fresno State, spending the week out west, and then Clay Helton, a little bit of going back home to the Coliseum where he coached for USC, and that is very exciting and certainly an opportunity for Georgia Southern to potentially get off to a really good start and certainly get ranked if you do start out 2-0. And how much does Georgia Southern mean to this community of Statesboro? It has got to be one of the smallest, if not the smallest market in the Sun Belt, along with probably Boone, North Carolina. They are very passionate about their football. One of those teams out east who thinks they should be winning championships year in and year out because they have. And yet doing it in the Sun Belt is obviously proven to be a little bit challenging. Let's get to it. He is the Josh Aubrey, been covering the Georgia Southern Eagles since 1991. He is on the Belt Beat, and he is Locked On Sun Belt. Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sun Belt, your teams every day. We continue with our feature, the Belt Beat. We talk to the beat writers who cover the teams in the Sun Belt, and we are talking to the Josh Aubrey, sports director of the Statesboro Herald. He has been covering the Georgia Southern Eagles for a long, long time, since 1991, all those FCS championships, and now into the Sun Belt. It is year 4 for Clay Helton, and J.C. French the fourth is back. We think they should contend in the East. Josh, thanks very much for hopping on Locked On Sun Belt, and how are you?
I'm doing good, Dave. Appreciate you having me on, and always enjoy speaking with you.
All right, so I think I happen to think that JMU is they were picked to win more along the lines about reputation than anything else, and deservedly so. They have a winning reputation. Georgia Southern has a reputation of being good, but always seeming to stub their toe, which is what they did last year. They had some big wins. I mean, they pulled out some wins. Marshall, they pulled out. South Alabama.
JMU.
Yep, JMU. And then they stubbed their toe against Troy.
ODU.
ODU, yes.
Yeah,
ODU.
That was the one. That was the killer right there.
Yeah, that was embarrassing. So now they got J.C. French was back, and I do make fun of the interceptions, but I think like 8 out of the 10 interceptions were in 2 ball games, right? Including
I mean, that's the crazy thing, is the last 2 bowl games. One was Davis Brin 2 years ago at the Coastal Champions or bowl game. He had 4 interceptions. And then French did it last year, and he really didn't have a lot going in. I think he had 7. He had a handful of fumbles that really hurt him, but interceptions weren't real bad. And then he had 4 in one game, and you're like, take him out. What's going on? Do you have a back? Can we put Tyler Budge in? 2 years ago it was like, take Davis Brin out, put in J.C. French. We need somebody else in there. So. But this will be the first time under Clay Helton that he's had a quarterback that's returned, because Kyle Van Treese was the first year, Davis Brin was the second, JC was last year, and now it's JC's job, and he said that all along. Interesting enough, his son Turner, who transferred from Western Kentucky, where he played for Coach Helton's brother, has now the number 2 and is pretty solid number 2 right now, and has done a lot in the scrimmages. He's looked really well.
Oh, all right. And so we can even go back. Danny Reed has the broadcaster for Georgia Southern put on those highlights, and I still remember the Kyle Van Treese QB draw. And I tell everybody, you could tell me what, all the stuff about football. I'm much more of a baseball guy, but even I could see, the motion happening and the middle linebacker following the motion, and everybody could see the QB draw was coming, apparently, except Nebraska. But then you see the throw that Kyle Van Treese makes against App State, and that was a thing of beauty. I mean, right over the outstretched arm of the safety, just a perfect throw. And then Davis Brin may have thrown, you're talking about the bowl game, he may have thrown one too many interceptions against Wisconsin. Some of us may have had a little bit on that ball game.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like we said, J.C. French is back, and I guess J.C. French told Coach Helton that's never going to happen again. I mean, even if he throws 3 interceptions in that bowl game, they probably win the game, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was so close despite having those 4 killer turnovers in the game. They hung right in there and had a chance to win it late. But you're right, they came up short, and now they're over 3 under Coach Helton in the bowl games. And, I think last year it was a little disappointing because they also felt like they had a shot at the Sun Belt East, considering they beat Marshall and they beat ODU, and then they lose to a team like, beat Marshall and beat JMU, and then lose to a team like ODU. You're like, I was right there. So, yeah, there's high expectations on Georgia Southern every year, especially from the fans who remember the 6 flags over Georgia here. Clay's a really good guy, a good coach. He's out in the community saying all the right things, but I think he's got to make that next step. And I think he feels like he needs to as well.
Well, that's the thing about that East, right? Everybody has some, championship bloodline, whether it is App State, Georgia Southern, JMU, even ODU has something in there. Marshall back in the day. And that's the problem with the East, is that only one team can win it from the East, since we're still in divisions. That makes that Eastern division very, very difficult and very tough for the coaches.
Yeah, and you don't know. I mean, that's the transfer portal now is such a crapshoot because, Georgia Southern has 9 guys that were picked preseason all Sun Belt, but we don't know if some of these guys that they brought in at JMU or App or, anywhere, Coastal, if they're going to click. And if they click, how's that going to be? Now, Georgia Southern has gone, I think, very much more lightly into the transfer portal than a lot of other teams, and Coach Helton's kind of preached that he's wanting to have 4 or 5 year guys and not try to go in there except for a position here or there. And that seems to be where we are right now. And a couple of the guys they've got in right now in the transfer portal have really done a very good job so far for the Eagles in the preseason.
Except for his QBs, because he's done that twice.
Well, yeah, obviously that. But
I
meant the guys that they have in there right now have looked pretty impressive so far in the scrimmages and in the spring game.
As he mentioned, and we're talking with Josh Aubrey, sports director, Statesboro Herald, Lockdown Sunbelt, your teams every day, continuing the Belt Beat feature here on Lockdown Sunbelt. Has Clay Helton mentioned anything else that he's liked, what he's seen from J.C. French here a few weeks into camp? I mean, camp is basically over, right? We have 2 weeks for the season. Teams are now preparing for week 1.
Yeah, I mean, his big thing about JC is that last year he feels like JC was kind of, like when you turn on a fire hose, and try to drink out of that. It's a lot to take in with their offense in the first year. And he said where he feels he's seen the most growth with JC has been the off the field stuff and being more of a captain and being more of a leader and, really trying to bring these younger guys in and the transfer guys and kind of be the leader you expect out of a quarterback at a Division I school. Don't think he would quite had that last year, and JC even admits there was some of that was left, off the table because he was just trying to get in the games. He's not a real vocal guy. Van Treese was a lot more of a vocal guy. He's a little more quiet, but the guys really seem to back him up, and and they seem to want to go to war with him. So that's a good factor.
Yeah, a couple of things about that. You're the de facto leader as the quarterback, vocal or not, right? You kind of have to be. There may be some other guys that are more vocal, but you kind of have to be you have to be the leader as the quarterback. And it's important to be a leader in the transfer portal these days with so many new guys, whether you got a lot at Georgia Southern or not. It may be more difficult for guys who are coming in, like Walker Howard with the Cajuns has accepted that role, and he's new. Right. Yeah. And so, and whereas JC French is bringing the new guys along, whether it's not very many guys at all, but it's important to bond as quickly as you can, because it's not 25 guys in a recruiting class that are growing together. It's, it's going to be you're lucky if you leave college with a dozen who you came in with.
Well, then the good thing is their offensive line is returning pretty much intact from a year ago. They've got two really good receivers in Dalen Cobb and Josh Dallas, who both did a really good last year. More possession kind of guys that can run with the ball, take a short pass. But now they've got a couple guys who can stretch the field. They've got Cam Brown, who they brought in from Auburn. He's a specimen. He's, maybe 6'4", 205, 210, big guy. He's been running some really good routes, and he can go up and get the ball in traffic. So I feel like the outside receivers, they've got a little size out there that they haven't had in a while. They've been more like Derwin Burgess, guys that are 5'8" or so. But now they've got a couple 6 foot. They brought in a tight end from Western Kentucky, River Helms. He's a big 6'5" kid. Another guy he stole from his brother. And they're expecting him to do real well at tight end too.
Let's take a timeout. We'll come back and continue our conversation with the Josh Aubrey from the Statesboro Herald. We talk about this West Coast trip, heading out to Fresno State, and a little reunion for Clay Helton heading back to Southern California to take on those USC Trojans. We'll do that after I tell you about Prize Picks and Drip Drop. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up, and college football isn't far behind. Whether you've got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in the game. Download the Prize Pick app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, run your game. And Drip Drop. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether that's workouts, long days on campus, or focus through back-to-back classes, hydration is where it all starts, and that's where Drip Drop comes in. Drip Drop is doctor-developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading sports drinks. I got mine right here. Drip Drop. All right. And it is big doing those tours when it's really hot in those warehouses. Very important to stay hydrated, and Drip Drop helps me do that. That is for sure. Even offering it to the customers, we want them to stay hydrated just as importantly as myself as well. Right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. We continue our conversation with the Josh Aubrey, sports editor, at the Statesboro Herald, talking about the Georgia Southern Eagles and this odd West Coast swing. They're staying over there for more than a week. They start off the season against Fresno State, and then they're taking on the USC Trojans. Let's get back to it. He is on the Belt Beat. He is the Josh Aubrey, and he is Locked On Sunbelt. Talking to Josh Aubrey, sports director, Statesboro Herald, Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. All right, so a scheduling quirk, maybe. Clay Helton and Georgia Southern heading out west for Fresno State, and then heading home, going to USC, going back to where, reuniting, I guess. I'm not sure if you want to call that home, but where he used to coach, obviously, a reunion, so to speak. And they've decided, obviously, they ran the numbers, and it's got to be worth it for them to stay out there, probably costing not all that much more, and helping out the guys for him not going back and forth. I guess the first question is, whose idea was that? And the next question is, do you get to spend 10 days out on the West Coast as well?
Wow. See, that's what stinks. I used to cover the team, and I used to be able to go with them. They've kind of cut back on some of that now. Right. I do believe that falls under our new AD. Chris Davis took over toward the end of football season last year, and maybe he just wanted to go and play Pebble Beach or do some golfing out there while they're there. I hate that I'm missing it. This is also, I've been doing this since '91. This will be the first time that there won't be a press conference held the week of a ball game that we can ask. They're talking about doing one virtual, but since they're going to be there for 2 weeks, it's going to be, we're going to have to do it virtually, and they won't be in person. To be able to do that presser the week of the USC game. Right. But it's exciting for them. There's been a lot of talk about the Fresno game because Kurt Warner's kid's going to be starting quarterback at Fresno. And that should be a good game. I would imagine, it's a pivotal game because it's one of those games that they should possibly win. But if they start off 0-2, then you're kind of behind the 8 ball there and needing to win, even though it's non-conference games. You don't want to go in, conceivably, 1-3 or whatever, because they got a good game coming at home after that. But Fresno's the game that I think that they should be right there with them. And USC, I was thinking if there's kids that have not really played in that kind of an atmosphere, it could do one or two things, and one of the positions at Georgia Southern that we've talked a lot in the media that Coach Helton hasn't talked too much about is the kicking game. And they could have a kicker starting this game who's never played in a high school or a college game.
Oh boy.
They've got a guy that came from this Australian, we have a punter who's all conference who did this as well, but they've got a kicker and Donnell Dempsey, who they were real high on, but you're in the Rose Bowl. This is a different atmosphere.
Well, right. But I would go hashtag always the bright side. He may just be totally oblivious and naive to the whole thing. For us, growing up in this country, that would be a whole thing. He may not have any idea what he's walking into.
True,
he may not care whatsoever.
That is, you got a point there.
Yeah, it may just be a big crowd to him compared to walking in walking into the Coliseum. So we'll see how that goes. We're talking to Josh Aubrey, sports director, Statesboro Herald, covering the Georgia Southern Eagles. All right, so where are some other strengths? Obviously, defensively has got to be one of those spots where, Georgia Southern, made some strides last year. They were really good defensively last year in the Sun Belt.
Yeah. I think they took a step forward on the defensive side of the ball. They got a lot of guys coming back. The defensive line should be solid. The big question, the safeties, they brought in some transfer guys in the secondary. And the biggest question mark to me going into the season, besides kicker, was linebacker, because they lost Marquez Watson-Trent, who was the Defensive Player of the Year in the Sun Belt. He's at Nebraska now. They must have liked what they saw a couple years ago from him. But not only was he the leading tackler and the Defensive Player of the Year, he was by far their captain, even both sides of the ball. Everybody looked to him for leadership. Now that side's a question mark in that regard, but they've got Brendan Harrington, who comes over from Appalachian State, who was the captain at App State last year, a fifth-year senior. They're really high on him. They've got Brandon Tyson, who comes in. He's a junior from Elon, and both of those guys have really come in strong, along with Davon Hicks, who's a returning linebacker, and they've really provided a lot of leadership. And I've talked to those guys about, when you come in, you got to walk a fine line if you're going to try to be a leader and you're just coming into this team for the first time. And they said in the spring they kind of felt things out, tried to lead by example, and now they feel like they're able to talk a little more and have the respect of the players a little bit more on that side of the ball. So I think the linebacking core should be solid. The corners, they return Chance Gamble, who was an all-conference guy. Justin Myers is a safety that was also on the all-conference team. And then they've got a couple of taller guys back there that are transfers that they're hoping for big things from this season.
Let's take one more timeout. We'll come back and wrap up our conversation with the Josh Aubrey from the Statesboro Herald. We talk about how much Georgia Southern means to the community of Statesboro. We'll do that after I tell you about Open Phone. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you needed a service. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications. Do you juggle 2 phones just to keep business and personal phone calls separate? Open Phone solved that instantly. Your whole team can share one number and respond to customers like a shared inbox. No more who's handling this. And the AI agent handles the after-hour calls, answers common questions, and captures leads, so I never miss a customer again. See why over 60,000 businesses trust Open Phone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnCollege. That's openphone.com/LockedOnCollege. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. Open Phone. No missed calls, no missed customers. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. Let's wrap up our conversation with the Josh Aubrey, sports editor of the Statesboro Herald, talking about Georgia Southern and how important it is, and it is a big year for Clay Helton, how much Georgia Southern means in Statesboro, and is Clay Helton's job on the line? How important is it for the Eagles to contend in the Sunbelt this season? He's once again Locked On Sunbelt. All right, we're talking with Josh Aubrey, sports director, Statesboro Herald, Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. We're doing our feature, the Belt Beat, covering the guys covering the teams in the Sunbelt, and he's been doing it since 1991. Let's talk a little Georgia Southern history, because you mentioned the 6 flags over Georgia. How much does Georgia Southern mean in Statesboro? Because I'll tell you, and I mentioned this to Clay Helton, when that pass went over the App State safety head, or his outstretched arm, and Clay got on TV, and he's been doing this a long time. All right. And, I certainly don't mean any disrespect, but it's not a Rose Bowl victory. Nonetheless, I don't know if I've ever seen Clay Helton that thrilled with a victory. Well, it was pure unadulterated joy. And it's just a huge win. I'll put it this way. It was as big as win. He couldn't have been happier if he did win the Rose Bowl. Let me put it that way.
Well, they know, especially App State. App State's that there's a lot of Sunbelt teams that like James Madison, Old Dominion, Marshall, they played them before, but it's not a rivalry. Even Troy, who they were in with before, not a rivalry. App State them and App State come in the league together. They both make that jump, to FBS together. National championships that they've both won. So that App State game means a lot. And, anytime you beat your rival, whether that's, USC beating UCLA or, whoever it might be, Auburn, Alabama, that means something. And I think he's really embraced the culture here. He's really tried to go out there and any traditions Georgia Southern's had. They've got a new facility, but they still go over to the old field once or twice on the grass on beautiful Eagle Creek, as Irk named it. It's just a little tributary that runs around there, and they still, the guys jump in there, kind of a baptism for the seniors and the new coaches. So he's really done a good job of doing that, and he, like I said, he's as professional as they come.
Yeah.
And I think he knows how much football means. And I think that was a selling point for Georgia Southern, is the fact that you're expected to win here. It might not be USC, but I think he wanted a head coaching job and he wanted to go somewhere where football matters, and it matters here in Statesboro. And, there was a little bit of a fear that when, the Tyson era and, the Van Gorder era, that the program started going down, and, Willie Fritz brought it back up, and there was, there's been some ups and downs, but I really think people in this town want a winner so bad again. They really wanted to taste that, championship, have a championship banner to fly over the stadium again, because it's been a while.
And then, how much pushback did he get? We're going from, the option and the running that had been so successful there. We're going pro style offense, and he's not afraid. We're throwing the football.
Well, I don't think. See, the option that Paul Johnson ran and that Jeff Monken ran was a watered down version. Even when Willie Fritz was here, he ran it out of the pistol, and they threw the ball a little bit more. And then, Tyson Summers, they tried to do, and it really wasn't the option. So I don't think as many people were as upset as they were when Brian Van Gorder took over and said there is no option, and kind of stuck his middle finger at the option and a lot of the traditions. Even when Chris Hatcher was here, I think people were warming to the passing game. And I know there's a lot of people who still wish, I loved watching the option run the way they ran it, under center option with, the way Army has doing it. And
Army and Navy.
It's fun to watch. And it was something that was our identity. So when you go away from that and you don't win, I think that's one thing. But if you go away from it and you're still able to be successful, I think the people here just want to have a winning team right now.
Talking to Josh Aubrey, sports director, Statesboro Herald, Locked On Sunbelt, your teams every day. A few more questions. So I think it's them. It's Georgia Southern. I have ODU because I'm just a big believer in these days. Same coach, same quarterback. And I think Colton Joseph is going to take off this year. And we're waiting to see if Alonzo Barnett, the third, is back for JMU. We'll see if Matt Sluka, if he fills in the meantime, how much he can do is running, because passing can be a little inconsistent. And we'll see what Marshall looks like with all their guys gone. We'll see what App State is with the new coach. We'll see if Georgia State can take a next step, and we'll see what Coastal Carolina looks like. Again, they can't get any consistency with their quarterbacks yet. So I think Georgia Southern, I think Georgia Southern is going to contend, or else I think Clay's going to be in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think things are set up very well for them right now.
I don't know if you necessarily have to win it, but he needs to contend.
No, and I think he's got to contend, and I think he really needs. They got to win a bowl game too.
Yeah.
I think that's something. When you go 3 years in a row and you have 4 turnovers in 2 games in a row, the fans. We travel as well as anybody in the Sun Belt Conference as far as that goes. You don't want people to think, oh gosh, another bowl game. It's another mid-level bowl game, and are we going to turn the ball over again or not? You want them to go in with some expectations that yes, we're going to win a bowl game this time around. And like you said, I think the way things are set up, yeah, Old Dominion has a quarterback. He looked really good against Georgia Southern. That was one of his coming out party games, I feel like. But I don't know how good they're going to be on the defensive side. JMU, their defensive front is always among the top in the nation, stopping the run. I think where Georgia Southern has an edge over a lot of these teams is the continuity, the guys they've got coming back, and I think they're solid on both sides of the ball. The turnovers is going to be a key. I think the kicking game could play a big factor, and I'm really watching that one closely because there's going to be a game or two that's going to come down to kicking, and I hope I'm wrong, and I hope whoever they put back there is solid and can get it done. But I like Georgia Southern's chances, and I've been a little pessimistic at times, but I really think they've got everything in place this year to be able to win the East.
Well, let's look at it optimistically because say they start out 2-0, they'll be a top 25 team for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's good opportunities for a lot of these Sun Belt teams, right? JMU's coming to me here in Louisville. Arkansas State's got Arkansas and Iowa State's going there. The Cajuns are going to Missouri, right? There are opportunities to get ranked in the top 25. Like JMU and the Cajuns could be, I mean, I don't know if they will be, but they both could be undefeated come October 11th. That could be a top 25, top 15 team matchup on ESPN2, which I'm sure it'll be when they're playing. So if somehow, maybe like you said, maybe they just beat Fresno State and they, play a close game against USC, they could still be ranked in the top 25 and all of a sudden rattle off a couple of wins. And all of a sudden Georgia Southern's 4-1 heading into October. They'd be in good shape.
Yeah, that's what I think a lot of people are saying, that Fresno State is such a big game, even though it's the season opener, because it could set the tone. They were able to win that game convincingly or just win the game when you're traveling that far. And then if they were able to finally, sneak up and beat USC, Clay's going to throw the kitchen sink at those guys. I know he's close, but you can be close with a coach and still want to beat their brains in. And I think, he really wants that to be able to, to get a little payback maybe for the USC. I'm impressed that they played, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, was this a relatively new arrangement, or was this made 10 years ago before anybody?
No, it wasn't made 10 years ago.
Well, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
It's frustrating here because we've had such a good rivalry, not rivalry, but an in-state game, and Georgia quit playing us. And there was a little bit of a reason to that years back, because Georgia Southern, there was a game or two they probably should have won that game. But now with the NIL the way it is, the big guys in the SEC are paying so much more. It's a different game, and I don't see why they don't bring Georgia Southern back, because it was so much fun as media and fans to go watch Georgia Southern play Georgia or even USC. The other USC, because South Carolina is only 2.5 hours away. Right. It will be a close game, a close venue to go to. And, it seems like we played Florida. We played, of course, won that game. But, I'd like to see us be able to play a game where people can get in their cars and drive to them, like Auburn or Florida State or someone like that. Because some of these games, the Nebraskas and the and the Wisconsins and the USCs, it's a little tougher for our fans with the disposable incomes to go to a lot of those games.
It is. That's true. And boy, if they start out, what did I say? If they start out 3-1, then they get then they're at James Madison, and that's setting up the rest of the season.
And like you said, if JMU does well, that could be two teams that could be in the top 25.
That would be in the top 25. Yeah.
If they ended up being ranked. So yeah, the front end of their schedule is a little bit tough this year for the Eagles, but you know, it also comes with the caveat as if you win some of these games, you know, they've got Jacksonville State and Maine. They should win both of those. You know, if they were just to go 3-1, like you said, and then they go into James Madison, it's at James Madison, not a great place. You beat them last year. It's going to be tough, but you know, that right there could be a game that decides who wins the East. And it's the first game of the Sun Belt for both teams.
I mean, you could be playing for home field advantage in the Sun Belt championship game right there.
Yeah. I mean, because, you know, after that, you know, they've got Southern Miss, Georgia State, Arkansas State, then App. We don't know what App's going to be like, and that game is at App, and it's a Thursday night game. So, you know, that could be interesting. But, you know, Coastal at home, ODU's at home. They got to go to Marshall to wrap up the regular season. And hopefully that Marshall game means a lot because that would be great for Georgia Southern to be able to put themselves in that position, because I think it's good for the league to get a team like Georgia Southern back on top, in my opinion. Of course, I'm a little biased, but
sure.
I think it's good to have some teams like App and Georgia Southern back there on top, because they may not be the blue blood Sun Belt teams, but I think there are teams that nationally people have heard of, and it's good to have that when you're somebody like the Sun Belt Conference.
That's true. That's true. He's Josh. He's the Josh Aubrey, sports director, Statesboro Herald, hopping on Locked On Sun Belt, doing the Belt Beat, covering those Georgia Southern Eagles since 1991. Always appreciate your time, Josh. Thank you so much, and enjoy the football season. Hopefully we'll catch up sometime during the year. Thank you so much.
Dave. Always a pleasure.